They planted in 72. We think of them now as wine families, but really they were ag families, which meant if they didn't pull together, Mother Nature was going to just bury them. So out of absolute necessity, they created a ethos of collegiality and collaboration that is with us today in the Willamette Valley, and it absolutely sets us apart, I think. 75% of the wineries in Oregon, I think, are under 5,000 cases.
Oh, wow. Small, family run. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 186. Are you curious about what makes Oregon unique from other wine regions? How could climate change impact winemaking and the styles of wine you drink? And what can we learn from the youngest generation now working in the wine industry? You'll hear those stories and more in my chat with Eugenia Keegan, a winemaker and pioneering legend in the wine industry, who has some fabulous stories to share with us about her decades-long career. Now, on a personal note, before we dive into the show with the continuing story of publishing my new wine memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, the current subtitle is Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Depression, and Drinking Too Much. I'm wondering if this tweaked subtitle would be better. Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Depression, and Drinking with a New Taste for Life. If you have strong feelings one way or the other, please let me know. Although my memoir isn't a wine book, it takes place in the wine industry and gives you an insider feel of what it's like to be a wine writer. Along the way, I sprinkle wine tips in, like the best way to save leftover wine and why artichokes can ruin the taste of wine. The late, great Anthony Bourdain, in his memoir, Kitchen Confidential, warned us to stay clear of buffets and seafood on Mondays. You'll have to read the book to find out why. I think these juicy little tips enliven a book that's about a particular industry, even when it's not a how-to guide. Have you encountered other books like this, perhaps about other industries, or, in fact, about restaurants or wine? If so, I'd love to hear from you. I'll share a beta reader review with you now from Kathy Garrido in Toronto, Ontario. Quote, I read the whole book in a day plus an hour. She had me hooked from the get-go. While we lead different lives, I can empathize with many situations in this book. I was fully engaged and drawn into her story. It's a message of hope and has some great lessons. I felt like I was in good company. I'll definitely recommend it to my friends. I think this book will appeal to other women who have to balance raising children, sustaining a marriage, and growing a career along with everything else that life throws your way. We're all faced with good times and bad, and it's good to be reminded that we will survive. I think her book will be interesting to others who are in careers dominated by men, those of us who have faced online criticism and bullying, and some who are interested in what it's like to be working in the world of wine. She kept it lighthearted enough, and while clearly events that occur in this book are serious and stressful, it has an optimistic tone. I've been through many similar situations, including dreading coming face-to-face with people who had treated me horribly before actually meeting me. I relate to this on so many levels. Online reviews are the worst, such a sign of our times. I also relate to not becoming an alcoholic in spite of occasionally feeling like I'm headed that way after some tough times. I think readers can all learn from her experiences. Clearly, she's in her element in this memoir. 4.5 stars. Thank you, Kathy. I've posted a link to a blog post called Diary of a Book Launch in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/186. This is also where I share more behind-the-scenes stories about the journey of taking this memoir from idea to publication. If you want a more intimate insider seat beside me on this journey, please let me know you'd like to become a beta reader and get a sneak peek at the manuscript. Email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. Okay, on with the show. Eugenia Keegan is a fifth-generation Sonoma County native who has worked in almost all aspects of the wine business, from making it to selling it. She's currently the general manager and vice president of the Oregon portfolio of Jackson Family Wines, which includes Penarash, Willackenzie, Grand Moraine, and Zena Crown, Sidori, and La Crema. She's actively involved in the broader wine community, either serving or having served on the board of directors for the Oregon Wine Board, the Oregon Wine Growers Association, the Willamette Valley Wineries Association, the Napa Valley Wine Auction, and the Linfield Wine Education Advisory Council. Hey, Eugenia, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Natalie, hello, hello. Finally, we're here together. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. That's so good. Well, before we jump into what you're doing right now with wine, Eugenia, let's go back to some of your more memorable wine moments earlier in your career. You say you worked with your grandfather on a farm when you were growing up. What was that like? What was your most memorable moment during that time?
I don't know if it's a memorable moment so much, but it's a whole atmosphere of, on the family farm. And I don't want to imply that my grandfather was too much of a farmer. He was a big hop grower and became a hop broker, as a matter of fact. And the family West Sonoma is a perfect example of agriculture in Sonoma County, from cattle to hops to beans to prunes to grapes, where we are today.
So really mixed farming. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a real evolution of the farming in the area. But I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and my parents got a divorce when I was young, and I spent quite a bit of time there. And it was just the solace. I guess my grandfather every morning would go around and check on everything on the ranch, and I would jump in the pickup with him. And he would explain life to me that way and nature to me that way by pointing out this and that. And seemed so peaceful, seemed so blissful.
Wow. And you've adopted some of those habits yourself now before you go into the office each day. You're out, you love to go out in the vineyards.
Well, you learn that if you don't do it then, you'll get in the office and you'll never get back out. I think we all
It's
know
true.
that problem. So, yeah, I like to start the morning in one of the vineyards, and it's a very way to sort of get your bearings, get your head on straight for the day, and just feeling nature around you and how small you are, I think, in the big world at the end of the day. So it's a great way to start the morning.
Yeah, I can understand that. And that's what you mean by being close to the land.
Yes, like really being there every day and smelling it and feeling the air. And, every place has its own sense of self. I call it self. That seems odd saying that out loud, but that's the way I feel about it when I'm there. Each of the vineyards has its own personality.
Right. Personalizing it, or what is it, the big word? Anthropomorphization, or yeah. Yeah, it begins with A.
Yeah, exactly. We know the word. We're good.
Yeah, you're right. And I feel that way sometimes about wines too. Like they're people. I start talking about, is that a person you're describing, or is it a wine? Anyway, getting ahead. Do you have a favorite childhood food that you remember?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I hated food.
Really?
I ate hot dogs and scrambled eggs with ketchup on them.
Wow, that's quite the diet.
Period. And toast. That was it. Period. That was my diet until I was probably in high school, and I finally had a piece of pizza and decided it wasn't awful. I grew up not eating pizza, peanut butter and jelly, bologna. I didn't like any of that. And now, of course, I eat virtually everything, but, maybe organs, maybe not my most favorite thing, but I was a terrible eater.
Okay. Interesting. So was I. I was very myopic, and I like tomatoes for some weird reason, but nothing else. But do you have a wine pairing for those hot dogs, or would anything work these days with the hot dogs you liked?
One 4th of July, we had my mother over, who was a fabulous, fabulous cook and pretty snobby about what she ate. And my partner David and I decided we were going to have a hot dog taste off for the 4th of July. And when we served 4 different hot dogs pieces to my mother and said, now we're going to compare them and contrast, whew, she had a fit. But she loved hot dogs, so she got into it after a little while. She was expecting something more gourmet.
Was there a clear winner, by the way?
There was a clear winner. It was Oscar Mayer.
Good to know.
Right, I know. Can you believe it? And so, of course, we had to sing the Oscar Mayer song most of the day, which most of us can remember. That's great advertising when we can sing that song 30, 40 years later.
Oh, yeah.
But, the one fun thing about hot dogs is they are very versatile. And you can go all the way up to the big Zinfandel already sort of down to not a delicate Pinot Noir, but certainly a Pinot Noir with some muscle.
Oh, that's good to know. Excellent. If I understand correctly, you worked in the film industry in Los Angeles for a bit?
Yeah, I did. And, sometimes I wish I had done that, made a fortune, and then started a winery, which is sort of the normal pattern of those things. But I don't know if I would have made it out of there alive. Hollywood's a pretty rough place to be. And, you have to learn to party pretty hard. But I was there for a couple years. I was a production assistant. I absolutely loved it. That's all I really did. Go get coffee and stuff. But yeah, it was cool.
So why did you leave?
I was living with a gentleman down there, and we sort of realized that probably Hollywood and Los Angeles wasn't our jam, as they say these days. And really being in the country and farming and all of that was just much more who both of us were. And so we headed back up north.
Okay. And was it your experiences growing up in Sonoma that turned you toward wine, or was it later travels? I mean, what really got you bitten by the wine bug?
Yeah, I think growing up, it was more the agricultural bug, being in the field and farming and that sense of almost freedom that you have out there. The sky's the roof, it's really big. But it was really going to Europe. I took my junior year off and went abroad. And I said my mother was a great cook, and we had wine at the dinner table. We have the family vineyard, so there was wine that was part of our life. But it was really getting over to Europe and seeing that agriculture could be a lifestyle, but it was not just the farming part. It was taking the farming and making it into, this product that was the statement of place, the statement of nature, the statement of the work that you had done in the vineyard and the winery, but Mother Nature, of course, had to do a lot for you too. And it was really in that lifestyle that you see in Europe, particularly in France, Spain, and Italy. And that's what really excited me, that there potentially was a job, a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's so integrated there. The people who make the wine, it's not just a badge, it's something they're doing, that's their life's work, their calling, but it's also how they enjoy themselves. I love that.
Yeah, they do their own farming, which is a little different than, we do here. We tend to have other people doing our farming for us, but there the family does the farming. So they're doing the process all the way from the vineyard through to the bottle and onto the dinner table. And really, Natalie, after all, why do we make wine? We make it to share. We make it to have on the table with food and friends and family. That's the reason to make wine.
Absolutely. That community. And there's something about wine always. I mean, I didn't grow up drinking wine at all, didn't like beer and whiskey, too harsh, but I think it was that communal aspect. I mean, you just don't get that with a vodka shooter, right? It's the wine that is the slow conversation melding together of the people who are there.
And it's because of its perfect pairing with food.
True.
I mean, I love vodka cranberry. That's my go-to cocktail, but I don't have it at dinner. I don't have it with food.
Right. Yeah. Be overwhelming. True. Okay. So, can you remember as you got started what the worst moment in your wine career has been? Hopefully that's it. But is there anything that sticks out that you maybe learned from?
I made so many mistakes. I was a young manager managing a large number of people. I was no more older. They're much older than they were. I certainly wasn't more mature than they were. And it was a new business. The wine business is only 60 years old or so. So you're growing up in a new industry. So there's not a mistake I didn't make. Let's just put it that way. I can't think of one, but nothing that was absolutely catastrophic. So if there had been, I might not be here today, chatting with you. So
Absolutely. I recall from another interview you did, I think it was you or else someone on your team were running a tractor through the vineyard rows. Like, was that when it wasn't known that that could compact the soil and would spit up all kinds of stuff or whatever?
what we've learned about farming, I'm sad to say that we have been misfarming for these last 100 years. And all of the disking that we do, we're literally, throwing a carbon up out of the soil and into the air. And we didn't mean to do this incorrectly. We just didn't know. And so you're seeing a lot of work on no-till vineyards now, and also and carbon capture in the soil and things like that now, which is a real change, but it's because we just didn't know any better. So yeah, we've misfarmed quite a bit, but we're learning very fast right now and making amends,
And
literally.
disking, is that just the blade that would scoop up the dirt and throw it?
Mhm. Yeah. So it takes thousands of years to create that top inch of organic material, and we're just driving right through it and kicking all that stuff into the air where we're just polluting the air, losing the carbon that's sequestered in the soil. And then underneath it, as you said, we're compacting it. Those big tractor tires are, the top layer may be tilth because of the disc, but right below it, you've created this hard pan. And so it's wonderful taking those tractors out of the vineyard. They're noisy, they are polluters, and we're really stopping. At Jackson Family, we're doing a lot of regenerative experiments where we're doing a lot of no-till experimental work right now.
Oh, love that. Yeah, I know the whole portfolio is very much into sustainability, but I'm going to get there. There's so many paths we can pursue here. But take me to the best moment of your career.
Yeah, I really love sharing this. So in 1990, I think it was, or 91, I was the chairman of what we called Napa Valley Wine Auction at the time. Now it's Auction Napa Valley. And now they no longer have it after 30 years.
Oh, well, why did they stop?
I don't know. I think it just after 30 years, events sort of lose, they're built for one era and now we're quite a ways into a different era and they're working on other ways of generating, funds for their medical underprivileged people in the county, in Napa County. And it was the 10th year and we were not making, major bucks in those years. I mean, it was 10 million or something. It wasn't, nothing. And I remember sitting at my little house in Napa on a Sunday afternoon, and we had about a $10 million portfolio, and we had 3 organizations that we funded every year. And we had enough money to start another foundation, and we started a dental school, basically at the Queen of the Valley Hospital. And there was no dentistry for the underprivileged. And of course, we had enormous amount of workers in our vineyards that really didn't have access to medical care and certainly no dental care at that time. So we started the Queen Anne. So we were at hospital as a Catholic. So Sister Anne, she was like a queen actually, but Sister Anne was the head of the hospital at the time. So we named the dental clinic after her, Sister Anne. And it was just the idea, I don't have money like that. Then knew I never would. And 30 years later, that's still true. I don't have that kind of money. And the idea that I was able to make recommendations, I just thought, wow, it must be great to be rich in a way that you can really change people's lives. I mean, really in a major way, change their whole life by this contribution. And I was allowed to be instrumental in that decision. And I remember just sort of weeping on that day, but it was joy. I was weeping for joy that I had this opportunity to give back in that way.
Oh, that's powerful. It reminds me, Eugenia, I was talking to a local columnist for the what you might call the gossip column, but the social column. And I thought, don't you get tired of going to all these events and so on? And she flipped it around for me. She said, it's these schmoozy events with all the glitz and the glam that actually do a lot of good for our community. And she felt part of that. It really flipped my perception of some of these events you see with all the splashy photos and the people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for a bottle of wine. Well, it's bringing those people together, giving it a focal point and doing, as you say, some really good for the community.
Sometimes people don't know exactly how to do that giving on their own. They need guidance like that. So actually creating those opportunities is a plus for everybody in the end.
Yeah. In retrospect, would you have done anything differently on your path to get to where you are today?
Well, I think that all the time, but I'm pretty doggone happy with where I am. So maybe not. I don't know. I don't
Good
know.
answer. Yeah, sure. I would love to talk about how you met your husband because that's wine related too. Who is he and how'd you meet him?
Well, if he were telling the story, he would say upside down. We met upside down.
That's intriguing.
I was working in those days down in Carneros at Bouchain. I was CEO of Bouchain Vineyards. And my neighbors were the Saintsbury boys, Dick Ward and David Graves. And we're all the same age. And they were just like my big brothers. And we hung out a lot together. We learned together. We shared together. They're both big men. They're well over 6 feet, etc. And I'm about 5'1". I like to say 5'2", but that's slight exaggeration. And when we would meet, when Dave Graves and I would meet, he would pick me up and turn me upside down. That was his hug for me. So we were at the Steamboat Pinot Noir Conference in Steamboat, Oregon, which started in 1979. This was 1982. And I went up to Graves and he gave me a big hug and flipped me upside down and then introduced me to his friend, David Adultheim. And he had worked at Adultheim doing an internship a couple harvests earlier. And they were dear friends and are dear friends to this very day. I mean, they're really close friends. And I will say that Dave doesn't pick me up anymore and turn me upside down as we're all getting a little bit longer in the tooth here. But that was how I met David Adultheim. And we were both otherwise engaged at the time. We had other partners at the time. And there was that spark. And my father always used to say, where there's smoke, there's fire. And, my father's always right. And Dad knows best. And we just became very, very good friends. And then it was fast forward to 1998. And by then we were both unencumbered and we met up at IPNC and we went to IPNC every year, the International Pinot Noir Celebration in McMinnville. And it's really summer camp for adults who love Pinot. You just put your shorts on and go around and eat and drink and chat and learn and share for 3 days. It's just marvelous fun. And it was the opening session. There's a keynote, and David is sort of the Grandmaster of Oregon, and he was at front greeting people and welcoming them. And I came by and we said hello, and he said, "How are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm dating again." And I said, "How are you?" And he said, "Well, I moved out of the house a few weeks ago." And you could just see it right there. Two fast minds. We had a tradition of dancing at the Saturday night salmon bake. And we had done that for years, just again, as I said, as very good friends. And that night was a little bit different.
Okay.
And that was it.
Period. That's great.
We got together then, and I think it's 23 years later now.
Oh, wow. That is marvelous. And just tell us a little bit about David's winery. Like, when was it established and roughly what size of winery is it that he operates?
Yeah, so we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Adultheim. They were one of the first 10 wineries in the Willamette Valley. David started it with his first wife, Ginny. They bought the property where we live now in 1971, planted in 72, started making commercial wine in 78, really kind of 80, but they had some bottlings early on. So he was part of the original gang up here that I think more than anything, since this was a new growing area, it was the relationship of those first families, and they were ag families. We think of them now as wine families, but really they were ag families, which meant if they didn't pull together, Mother Nature was going to just bury them. So out of absolute necessity, they created a ethos of collegiality and collaboration that is with us today in the Willamette Valley, and it absolutely sets us apart, I think, from anything else. We don't do anything without everybody doing it together. It makes it quite fun, actually. So he's a strong leader in the community, and he sold Adultheim to his long-term partners that had been with him for 25 years, and they bought the winery from him in 2017, I think it was.
And how much does the winery make in terms of cases, approximately?
About 25,000.
Okay, yeah, it's not huge.
Kind of a medium, not huge, no, sort of just the medium size.
Yeah, right.
75% of the wineries in Oregon, I think, are under 5,000 cases.
Oh, wow.
It's a big figure like that. So it's mostly small wineries.
Small, family run. Has there ever been a wine or a wine-related issue you've disagreed over?
Oh, daily, nightly. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, it's really fun. We come from the same point of view, basically, about what we're doing and why we're doing it. But we obviously have very different thoughts about how we execute on things. But we're just so much better at what we do because we talk about all this stuff. I really respect his point of view, and I think he would say the same. So I get to try everything out on him, if you know what I mean.
Right. Like workshop it, the idea.
Yeah, thank you. Right, like workshop it. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So you decided to move to Oregon to join him, obviously. And that was because, if I understand, at the time you were managing a smaller winery. So one of the two of you had to move, and together you decided it would be you, I guess.
I don't know if there was any conversation about this, or a decision. I had my own brand, but at that point, Keegan Cellars, but I made it at rented space at a winery in northern Napa Valley. So moving was much easier for me at that time. And David was running the winery full time, and he was not going to be moving. So if anybody was going to move, it was going to be me, which is why I say I don't think there was much conversation about it. Like, it was just too obvious.
Sure. So now you manage all of the Jackson family wineries in Oregon. What do you worry about most these days?
It's climate change.
Yeah.
It's that we could be evolving into an environment, not next year or the year after, but over 20, 30 years, that changes the world of wine as we know it today. Is it as simple as just planting different varieties that can handle warmer climates? I don't know if it's that simple, particularly if you look at the water issues in California. Obviously, we don't have as serious an issue, but we certainly have some drought related issues. So I think that when I look at demand and consumers and all of that, I think those are issues and we have to pay serious attention to them. But I think that it's climate change that could literally undermine the way we do business and what we know of as grape growing and winemaking today.
And what would happen? Like, so even adapting with different grape varieties, that might not be sufficient. What do you think could happen in the worst case scenario with climate change? Soil becomes unfarmable or too salty or too dry?
No, but we can't make fine wine. A climate that's too warm for fine wine. We could grow crops. I think if we have a long-term problem, it's going to be feeding ourselves at some point in time, since we're making it so difficult to grow crops in a natural environment, in a healthy environment. The wildfires are a big deal. We have not figured out how to deal with smoke issues, the volatile compounds that we know end up in the wine. So we don't have an answer for that. So it doesn't matter what variety you plant, they're all susceptible. Equally, maybe not, but they're all susceptible.
Wow, fascinating and worrisome. So let's turn to a happier
Yeah,
topic.
actually, Natalie, I was thinking
Yes.
about that. I'm like, let's not go down this rat hole.
No, 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 I know. Well, I always balance.
Because today we're in beautiful shape. We're making some of the best wines ever. So for now, we're in great shape.
Excellent. Let's focus on that. So, what gives you the most pleasure about your job? I can tell clearly you enjoy it, but is there a particular aspect that you love the best?
Yeah, it's working with the younger generation. You don't realize how much you've learned over the years and the wisdom that you've gathered and the way the problem is presented to you and the solution's very clear. You know, you've been there before, you get it, you know what the mistakes are, the pitfalls. And having those conversations with younger people, I've been helping my niece through a job interview right now. And some of this stuff is just second nature to me, but brand new to her. And I just love being able to take all that experience that comes with time and download it and share it with the next generation. Super fun. Whether it's winemaking, whether it's management, whether it's team building, team leading, doesn't matter. It's all fun.
Hmm. And do you find there's a difference with the new generation, so to speak? Like, how are they approaching business and their careers differently from when you entered the business? I know times have changed and so on, but are they different?
Yeah, they're really different. It's amazing. And I watch my colleagues, the ones that are my age, listen to some of these kids and they're just aghast because they have so much more self confidence and they are already more conscious of their place in the world and the value of what they do. So I grew up certainly in the post World War II generation where work was the most important thing. And people thought they would brag about, oh, I haven't had a vacation in 6 years. Well, they don't brag about that anymore. There's a much stronger sense of work life balance, which is nothing but great. Employers need to respect that. And it's just very hard for me not to push that button on Sunday when I'm doing something, but wait till Monday morning because employees will respond. And so it's just as much a manager's responsibility to help your employees succeed. And some of that is really looking at work-life balance. In fact, at our Jackson Family Computers, if you start to send an email after 5 on Friday and before 8 on Monday, a little thing pops up and says, think about sending this Monday morning after at 8 o'clock.
Wow.
Just a little
Oh,
reminder.
that's
Just a
revolutionary.
little reminder, this is the weekend. Take some time off because we work hard. We're a very, very aggressive company. We are demanding. And if you're not working at the top of the game, you won't stay in this company very long. So they really understand that it's 110% when you're there. So you really need that counterpoint. And the managers, the owners, they all get it, which is great. Senior managers, owners, they all get it. So it makes for a very healthy environment. And I really literally shut off the computer for the weekend and I love it. And I come back Monday morning and I'm really excited to get back to work. And I've had time to think about things over the weekend, and stew on them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another part of sustainability.
It is part of sustainability. How well said. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. But what I love is the younger generation, particularly the women, they're very strong minded. They have a real sense of their place in the room. And I find it a little abrupt at sometimes. I'm like, wow. And then after I get over my generational response, I'm like, oh, that's so wonderful. Be strong, know what you want, go after it. learn how to share your desires in a way that makes the listener receptive.
Right. Is there ever a sense of too much entitlement? Like you're saying they're very confident. I mean, we're generalizing here, but do you find that it's perhaps not earned yet?
Yes, I think older generations or earlier generations were really taught the example of you have to pay your dues. Pay your dues. We heard that all the time growing up, and it's absolutely true. There's a point where it flips over. All of a sudden, you've paid your dues, and now I get the concept that, oh, I don't want to wait that long, or I don't want to have to put in that many years. But that's more about being ready to take on that position, and that comes with time and experience. I think that it's not unusual for people to be a little overzealous, and then they get into the real work stream and they realize, oh, I could use some experience and some time here to learn and be better suited to be a leader. So I think it's a growing curve. I have a young gentleman I work with who's about 25, and of course, he knows everything. And I did too at 25. That's what I have to remember. I did too.
Exactly. And yet at the same time, I find sometimes, I think women in particular of a certain age forget that that flip does happen and are still out there trying to earn it, trying to earn it, trying to, rise to something that they've achieved. And it's equally important to say, hey, you know what? I have put in my time. But that sometimes can be difficult to recognize as well.
Yes, I think that there's a group of people, generally white men, who expect to get there. They've been taught their whole lives that they're going to get there. Nobody's ever told them they should doubt that they're going to get there, wherever there is. And yet women hear all the time, that's not the place for you. Or, women don't do that. Or I ended up getting a drum set about 5 years ago that David lovingly gave me because I've always wanted to play the drums. And my mother told me that ladies don't play drums.
Ah, wow. You go for it.
Exactly, exactly. And now at my old age, I'm out there with my headphones on, listening to the same old rock and roll and just, beating those drums away.
Bounding it out.
Yeah, having the best old time. So
that's great. Sounds therapeutic. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Eugenia. Here are my takeaways. She really illustrates how Oregon is unique from other wine regions in its climate, geography, history, and wine focus. 2, Eugenia gets at the heart of how climate change may impact winemaking and wine styles. And 3, I love her take on what we can learn from the younger generations now working in the wine industry. In the show notes, you'll find my email contact, the full transcript of my conversation with Eugenia, links to her website, and where you can find the live stream video version of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. You'll also find a link to my free online class called 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix Them Forever. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/186. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or want to be a beta reader of my new memoir at nataliemclean.com. You won't want to miss next week when we continue our chat with Eugenia Keegan. In the meantime, if you missed episode 41, go back and take a listen. I chat about traveling to different wine regions with celebrity TV host Kevin Broch. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
There's a lack of bravery around wine for people that don't know about wine. Just remember in the room, it was like, what does it taste like? And people are afraid to say cotton candy.
Right.
But we know that that's one of the culinary descriptors, or candy in and of itself. Earth, wet leaves, we know all of these things. People are afraid to say them for the first time.
Yeah.
And yet, once you do, you're so empowered. The wine tastes to you like the wine tastes to you. I can read the label. I can read what Robert Parker thinks of this wine.
Mm-hmm.
I can read what Billy Munnelly, who I adore and love, thinks of this wine.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I'm only left with me. It's daunting. Nobody says that with beer. Like, guys don't drink beer and go, I get a little bit of the hops from the seashore by Seattle and the nose of dog hair.
If you liked this episode, please tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines and stories we discussed. thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a silky Oregon Pinot Noir. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.